The dust never settled in Perdition Creek. It swirled through the streets like restless spirits, coating everything in a fine layer of regret. Sheriff Jake Morrison had been tracking the woman for 3 days across the unforgiving Arizona territory, following reports of a mysterious figure who appeared at scenes of unexplained deaths, always carrying a peculiar wooden chest. The locals called her the Confessor. Jake found her at sunset in the abandoned mining camp of Devil's Hollow, sitting on the porch of what used to be the assayer's office. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with dark hair braided down her back and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone her age. The wooden chest sat beside her like a faithful dog. "You've been looking for me," she said without turning around. Her voice carried a strange accent, something European mixed with years of American desert wind. Jake dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his Colt. "Name's Sheriff Morrison. I need to ask you some questions about the deaths in Silver Ridge." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Deaths? Is that what you call them?" She finally turned to face him, and Jake felt something cold crawl up his spine. Her eyes were the color of old blood. "I suppose you could call them that. 4 men died in that town last week, all healthy, all found with expressions of pure terror on their faces. The doc said their hearts just stopped. But witnesses say you were seen near each scene." The woman stood gracefully, brushing dust from her long coat. "My name is Elena Vasquez, and yes, I was there." She placed a protective hand on the wooden chest. "But I didn't kill them, Sheriff. I saved them." "Saved them from what?" Elena's smile was sad and ancient. "From carrying their sins into the next world." Jake had dealt with plenty of crazy folk in his 15 years wearing a badge, but something about Elena's calm certainty made his trigger finger itch. "Lady, I don't know what kind of con you're running, but it's no con." Elena opened the chest slightly, and Jake caught a glimpse of what looked like folded papers and small objects. She quickly closed it again. "Would you like to know how it works, Sheriff? The real reason those men died with such terror in their eyes?" Against his better judgment, Jake found himself nodding. Elena sat back down, gesturing for him to join her. The desert was painting itself red with sunset, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. "I was born in a small village in the Carpathian Mountains," Elena began. "My grandmother was what you might call a sign-eater. When someone was dying, she would take their confessions, their deepest, darkest secrets, and consume them spiritually, so the dying person could pass cleanly into the afterlife." "That's just superstition." "Is it?" Elena's eyes glittered. "My grandmother taught me the ritual before she died, but she warned me never to use it unless absolutely necessary. The sins of others, they accumulate, Sheriff. They weigh on your soul like stones in a sack." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "And you think this ritual killed those men?" "Oh no," Elena said softly. "What killed them was what they discovered about themselves during the confession. You see, the ritual doesn't just transfer sins, it forces the confessor to confront them fully, to see them as they truly are, without the comfortable lies we tell ourselves." She opened the chest again, this time wider. Jake leaned forward and saw dozens of small bundles wrapped in white cloth, each tied with a black ribbon, papers covered in handwriting in various languages. Small personal items, a wedding ring, a child's toy, a military medal. Each bundle represents a life's worth of guilt, Elena explained. Thomas Hartwell confessed to abandoning his pregnant sweetheart 20 years ago, leaving her to die in childbirth. Marcus Finn admitted to stealing medicine meant for sick children during the war, selling it for profit while they died of fever. Samuel Creek revealed he'd been slowly poisoning his business partner for months to steal his share of their silver claim. Jake's mouth went dry. He recognized those names, all 4 men who had died in Silver Ridge. "And William Dorsey?" Jake asked quietly. Elena's expression darkened. William Dorsey confessed to something so terrible that even I, carrying the sins of dozens of men, nearly couldn't bear it. He had been. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He had been taking children from traveling families. Native children mostly, whom he knew wouldn't be missed by the authorities. He sold them to certain individuals in California who had particular appetites. Jake felt sick. Jesus Christ. When each man finished their confession, Elena continued, when they saw their sins laid bare without excuse or justification, their hearts simply couldn't bear the weight of what they truly were. The terror you saw in their faces wasn't fear of death, Sheriff. It was the horror of complete self-recognition. The sun had disappeared behind the mountains now, leaving them in purple twilight. Jake realized his hand was shaking slightly. Why? He asked. Why do you do this? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because someone has to, she said finally. These men would have died eventually anyway, carrying their crimes into whatever comes after. This way, their victims get a form of justice, and their sins become mine to bear. But that's not justice, Jake protested. That's not how the law works. Your law failed those children, Sheriff. Your law failed Thomas Hartwell's sweetheart, failed those sick children who needed medicine, failed Marcus Finn's partner. Elena's voice was steady but fierce. Sometimes justice has to come from other sources. Jake studied her face in the growing darkness. Show me, he said suddenly. What? Show me how it works. Let me see what's under that cloth you carry. Elena hesitated. Sheriff, I don't think. You said you carry the sins of others. Prove it. Elena sighed deeply, then reached into the chest and withdrew a bundle wrapped in white cloth, tied with a black ribbon like all the others. But this one was different. It seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light. This is Thomas Hartwell's confession, she said, holding it carefully. His abandonment, his cowardice, his responsibility for 2 deaths. When I took it from him, it became part of me. She began to untie the ribbon, and immediately Jake felt a change in the air. It grew thick, oppressive, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The cloth fell away, revealing a piece of paper covered in shaking handwriting, but also something else, a presence, a weight that seemed to press down on both of them. Jake found himself overwhelmed with images, a young woman crying in a boarding house room, her belly swollen with child. The same woman, pale and dying, calling out a name that would never answer. A small grave in an unmarked cemetery. Years of wondering, of hoping, of slowly dying inside. But worse than the images was the emotion, the crushing weight of guilt, the self-hatred, the knowledge that a simple act of courage could have saved 2 lives. Jake felt tears streaming down his face without realizing why. Now you understand, Elena said softly, rewrapping the bundle. The oppressive feeling lifted immediately, but Jake was left gasping. This is what I carry, multiplied by dozens of confessions. Every day, every moment, I feel their shame, their regret, their victim's pain. Jake wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. How do you stand it? Some days I don't know if I can, Elena admitted. But then I remember that these sins would otherwise go unpunished. These victims would remain unavenged. Someone has to bear witness. Someone has to carry the weight. They sat in silence as the stars emerged overhead. Finally, Jake asked, What happens now? I can't just let you go. The law. The law would put me in prison or an asylum, Elena finished. And then who would do this work? Who would give justice to the forgotten victims? Jake wrestled with himself. Everything about his training, his oath, told him to arrest this woman. But what crime had she actually committed? The men had died of their own guilt, their own inability to face what they truly were. There's something else, Elena said quietly. Something I haven't told you. What? I didn't just randomly find these men, Sheriff. They were drawn to me, compelled to confess. It's part of the ritual. Those carrying the heaviest sins are pulled toward a sign-eater like metal filings to a magnet. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 3 days of tracking me, riding alone through empty country, having plenty of time to think about your own life. If you were carrying any significant guilt, you would have felt the compulsion to confess by now. Jake realized with relief that he felt no such compulsion. His conscience, while not perfect, was relatively clean. But, Elena continued, there's someone else following me. Someone who has been fighting the compulsion for weeks, staying just far enough away to resist it, but close enough to keep tracking me. Who? I believe it's your deputy, Sheriff. Deputy Marcus Webb. Jake's blood went cold. Marcus had been acting strange lately, nervous, drinking more than usual, volunteering for solo patrols that kept him away from town for days at a time. What could he have done? Jake asked, though part of him didn't want to know. I suspect we'll find out soon, Elena said, looking past Jake into the darkness. Because he's here. Jake spun around and saw a figure on horseback silhouetted against the stars about 50 yards away. As his eyes adjusted, he could make out Marcus Webb's familiar outline. Marcus, Jake called out, that you, partner? The figure didn't respond but began riding slowly toward them. As he got closer, Jake could see that Marcus looked terrible, gaunt, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. I tried to stay away, Marcus said when he was close enough to speak normally. His voice was hoarse, desperate. God help me, I tried, but I can't fight it anymore. The dreams, the whispers. I have to tell someone, I have to. He dismounted unsteadily and walked toward Elena like a man in a trance. You're her, aren't you? The sign-eater? I heard the stories in Silver Ridge. Elena nodded sadly. Yes, and you've been fighting the calling. What calling? Jake demanded. Marcus, what the hell is going on? Marcus turned to his longtime partner with tears in his eyes. Jake, I'm sorry, I'm so goddamn sorry, but I have to. I can't carry this anymore. Before Jake could stop him, Marcus fell to his knees in front of Elena. I need to confess, he whispered. Elena looked at Jake with genuine sadness. Sheriff, you may want to step away. Sometimes the revelations are harder on those who care about the confessor. But Jake stood his ground. Marcus is my partner, my friend. Whatever he's done, I'll stand by him. Elena opened her chest and withdrew a clean white cloth and black ribbon. Very well. Deputy Webb, tell me what weighs so heavily on your soul. Marcus began to speak, his words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. 5 years ago, I was transporting a prisoner to Santa Fe. Young Mexican woman named Carmen Delgado, accused of stealing food for her sick child. She was innocent, Jake. I knew she was innocent. But Judge Morrison, your uncle, Jake, he wanted an example made. Tough on crime, he said. Jake felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. The second night out, we camped near Willow Creek. Carmen begged me to let her go, told me her boy was dying of fever, that she was the only one who could care for him. I was tired, Jake. Tired of the corruption, tired of sending innocent people to prison while the real criminals bought their way out of trouble. Marcus was crying openly now. So I let her go, cut her loose in the middle of the night and told her to run. Figured I'd tell everyone she escaped, that I fought but couldn't stop her. That's not so bad, Jake said quietly. Hell, I might have done the same. But Marcus wasn't finished. I thought she'd gotten away clean. But Judge Morrison suspected what had happened. He sent men after her, bounty hunters who didn't care about bringing her back alive. They caught up with her 2 days later. Elena's expression was grim as she began writing on the paper. They raped her first, Marcus continued in a broken whisper. All 3 of them. Then they shot her and left her body for the buzzards. When they came back to town, they told the judge she'd resisted arrest. He paid them their fee and closed the case. The desert was completely silent, except for Marcus's ragged breathing. But that's still not the worst part, he said. A week later I rode out to Willow Creek. I don't know why, guilt, I suppose. I found her grave, just a shallow scrape the animals hadn't gotten to yet. And next to her, Marcus broke down completely. Next to her was a child's grave, a little boy, maybe 6 years old. He'd died waiting for his mother to come home, starved to death, alone and afraid, calling for her with his last breath. Elena finished writing and folded the paper carefully. What was the boy's name? Miguel. Marcus sobbed. His name was Miguel Delgado, and he died because of my cowardice. If I'd been brave enough to refuse the transport in the first place, if I'd stood up to your uncle, if I'd done a dozen different things, that woman and her child would still be alive. Elena wrapped the confession in white cloth and tied it with the black ribbon. As she did, Marcus convulsed, as if something was being physically torn from his body. The oppressive feeling Jake had experienced before returned, but this time it was accompanied by images of a young woman's terror, a child's slow starvation, the casual cruelty of men who saw justice as a commodity to be bought and sold. But when it was over, Marcus looked peaceful. The haunted expression was gone from his eyes, replaced by exhaustion, but also relief. "It's done," Elena said, adding the bundle to her chest. "The sin is mine now." Jake helped Marcus to his feet, his mind reeling. His uncle, the judge he'd respected and admired, had been part of this corruption. And Marcus, his loyal deputy, had been carrying this crushing guilt for 5 years. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now Deputy Webb can die in peace, whenever his time comes," Elena said. "The sin he carried has been transferred to me. He's free of it. But the people who actually committed the crimes, the bounty hunters, the judge, they're still out there." Elena smiled sadly. "Justice works in mysterious ways, Sheriff. Judge Morrison died of a heart attack 3 months ago. The 3 bounty hunters." She consulted a small notebook from her chest. "Let me see. Robert Kane, killed in a bar fight in Tucson. James Sullivan, trampled by his own horse outside Phoenix. And Diego Vasquez, no relation, shot in the back during a poker game in El Paso." Jake stared at her. "You're telling me they all died after you took Marcus's confession?" "I'm telling you that sometimes the universe has its own sense of justice. The sins I carry don't just disappear, Sheriff. They have to go somewhere. And sometimes they find their way back to their true source." The 3 of them stood in the cool desert night, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jake made his decision. "Elena," he said formally, "I'm officially ending my pursuit of you. As far as my report is concerned, I tracked you to Devil's Hollow but found the camp abandoned. The mysterious deaths in Silver Ridge remain unsolved." Elena inclined her head gratefully. "Thank you, Sheriff. But I have one condition," Jake continued. "If you ever pass through my territory again, I want to know about it. Not to stop you, but, well, there might be others who need your services." Marcus looked up sharply. "Jake, you can't be serious about this." "Dead serious," Jake replied. "Marcus, how do you feel right now? Really feel?" Marcus considered the question. "Light," he said finally, "like I've been carrying 100-pound pack for 5 years and just set it down. Free." Jake nodded. "Some kinds of guilt are too heavy for one person to carry alone, and some crimes are too terrible for conventional justice to handle." He looked at Elena with new respect. "Maybe the world needs sign-eaters." Elena began packing up her chest. "I should go. Dawn will be here soon, and I have a long road ahead of me." "Where will you go next?" Jake asked. "Wherever I'm called," Elena replied simply. "The guilty always find me eventually, or I find them." As she prepared to mount her horse, Jake asked one final question. "Elena, what happens to you when you die? All those sins you're carrying?" Elena paused with one foot in the stirrup. "I don't know," she admitted. "My grandmother never told me. Perhaps they die with me." Perhaps they return to their original owners in whatever comes after. Or perhaps, she shrugged, perhaps someone else will take up the burden. She mounted her horse and rode slowly out of Devil's Hollow, the wooden chest secured behind her saddle. Jake and Marcus watched until she disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. "Think we'll see her again?" Marcus asked. Jake thought about his uncle, about the corruption he'd probably turned a blind eye to over the years, about the victims who'd never received justice through conventional means. "I hope so," he said quietly. "God help me. I hope so." As the sun rose over the Arizona desert, painting the sky the color of redemption, Jake Morrison understood that some burdens were too heavy for the law alone to carry. And sometimes, justice had to come from the most unexpected sources, even if it meant a lone woman riding through the wilderness, collecting the sins of the guilty and carrying them toward whatever judgment awaited in the darkness beyond the stars. The dust never settled in Perdition Creek. But maybe, Jake thought, some ghosts could finally rest easy, knowing that someone, somewhere, was carrying their tormentors' sins toward whatever justice the universe demanded. And in her wooden chest, Elena Vasquez carried 47 bundles of white cloth tied with black ribbon, each one containing a lifetime of guilt, each one representing a victim who could finally rest in peace. The weight of them threatened to crush her soul, but she bore it willingly, knowing that somewhere in the great balance of things, the scales of justice were slowly, inexorably, beginning to level.